Hello everyone, it's Silver. This is Kill Knight. So this game describes itself as very demanding, and I would say that's a good word to use. Exacting, I think, is another good word that describes it very well. Basically, this game is really hard, like really hard, and it sort of demands that you master its mechanics. But the interesting thing about that is, this is a very mechanically focused game, by which I mean it has very few mechanics to it, but they all inform each other and fit together in a way that creates this sort of cohesive whole, in a way that's similar to games like, say, Celeste or Ultrakill. Games that have this sort of tightly designed suite of mechanics that all work together with nothing that feels extraneous or like it's sort of hanging off of the edge as just a cool thing to have because everything that's here is here for a very specific reason and they all fit together like a puzzle. So the way that it works is pretty simple. You will choose a layer to go down, and each layer will have huge different waves of various enemy types that will spawn across a long period of sort of like a big arena battle, and your job is to make them all dead, to make them as dead as possible, as fast as possible. You do have a dodge dash, and by default that has 2 charges, although a lot of this is determined by the gear you're using because there are various different types of gear that you can equip that will change some of this stuff, including the number of dashes you have or the amount of cooldown it takes for each dash to recharge. But either way, you will need this dash. It does give you immunity frames, and it is absolutely required to know how to use it and exactly where the immunity frames are so that you know how to dodge through stuff, because later on there will be a very large number of enemies on screen and you can't possibly run around all of them, especially when also later on you'll encounter lots of big screens full of projectiles to dodge, so you will need this dash. In addition to the dash, you've also got 3 different weapons. You have a sort of main weapon, which is usually like a pair of pistols or similar things. You've also got a heavy weapon and a melee weapon, which is generally speaking a giant sword. And you will need all of these. They all have their own specific role in combat that you've got to learn and use to the most efficient way that you can. And they also all kind of inform each other and interact in a certain way that means you can't just focus on one, but you've got to use them all effectively. Just by killing enemies, they'll drop these red orbs, and you can gather them to increase that red gauge at the top of the screen, which is simply called kill power. And the higher it goes, the more damage you do and the faster you become, but taking damage decreases it and can actually knock you down levels of power, so you've got to be careful about that. And you've also got a health gauge, and this health gauge is deceptively very small. It might look kind of long, but it is not. You take tremendous amounts of damage whenever you get hit, and you can only survive a couple of hits, even on medium difficulty. So while dashing around the place and using your primary weapon, you'll figure out the basic loop pretty quickly. You will be using your main weapon most of the time. It does have unlimited ammo, but it needs to reload. And whenever you reload, you get an active reload bar where if you press the button again at just the right time, it'll reload faster and give you a bonus. But there's a little bit more to this than your usual active reload bar because it's actually used for multiple different things. If you press the fire button, then you will reload your primary weapon with it, and it will overdrive it. And every different primary weapon has a different overdrive effect. The one you start with gives a tremendous fire speed increase, so your overall DPS goes way up, whereas the weapon that you get after that pierces a small number of enemies per shot, but if it's overdriven, it pierces all enemies on screen. So trying to overdrive as often as possible is usually a good idea. Now, your heavy weapon actually uses ammo. It can run out and doesn't reload in the traditional sense. It is very powerful, and all of the heavy weapons that you can select tend to be like screen-clearing weapons. They're very strong, but yeah, they've only got a limited number of shots. And this is where the melee weapon comes in. The melee weapon is also extremely strong and has a sort of small-range cleaving effect, so it is very dangerous to use because you have to be right in the enemy's faces, but you can cleave through large groups with it if you time it right. Kills with the melee weapon give you heavy ammo, so this is how you actually recharge your heavy ammo. While you're reloading your primary weapon, if you press the melee weapon button instead when the reload is in the right spot, then you will do a big sort of slash attack that fires a wave forward and just has a big cleaving effect. It does a lot of damage and hits in a really wide area. It also gives extra heavy ammo when you pull it off. Also, if you hold one of the buttons, the R1 button, while you're around those red orbs, you will instead absorb them into a different gauge. They won't contribute to your kill power at all, but you will absorb them into this sort of heavy weapon gauge. You can also press this button during the active reload section at the right time to absorb all of the orbs on the screen at once, so you don't have to be close to the middle, just suck them all up to you immediately. This is a very important gauge because this is the only way for you to heal. This gauge powers something called a Wrath Burst, and once it's full of all those orbs, then you can hold the same button down and press your heavy weapon button to fire a Wrath Burst. And the exact form this attack takes depends on the heavy weapon you have equipped, but the first weapon that you get, which is a big shotgun, fires this huge orb of energy forwards that pierces through all the way to the other end of the arena and just does massive amounts of damage and tends to one-shot whatever it hits. Once an enemy is killed with this Wrath Burst, they will drop a green health shard, and picking this up will heal you a very small amount. So the only way for you to actually get health back mid-run is to charge up this burst and kill as many enemies as you can with it in one big screen-clearing swoop, and then pick up all of the health crystals they drop. Also, there will be some enemies that spawn at certain times that have a sort of purple glowing shell around them. These enemies will take a lot more punishment before they go down because you have to break through the shell. However, if you hit them with a burst, then it will cause an explosion wherever they are, dealing a bunch of damage to enemies around them and destroying the shell all at once. So you often want to save these bursts for those moments, but you also want to always have one in the chamber ready to go in case you take damage. That way you can heal, because it's never a good thing to need healing but not have a burst charged up. That way you have to spend some time charging it up, potentially getting yourself killed if you're not careful. So using those orbs to charge up this gauge is often a good idea. That way you always have one in the chamber ready to go if you need it. But of course you've got to be careful about that, because all of the orbs that you're absorbing into this gauge are not contributing to your kill power, which increases your power and speed in general. So it's sort of a balancing act. In addition to all of those gauges, you've also got a melee weapon gauge that charges up simply by getting kills with the melee weapon, and you can spend segments of this gauge to do a huge slam attack that does like a massive AoE damage centered on you, and is just very good to have ready in case you get surrounded by enemies. But also there will be some enemies that sort of flash red before they attack you, and if you time a melee attack on them right before they hit you, then you'll parry them and deal massive amounts of damage, and you can use this gauge to do that instead. And you pretty much always want to do this. Any enemies that have one of those red flashing attacks, you immediately want to take down this way, because it's going to be the most efficient way to do it, the way that avoids the potential of taking damage yourself. And it's also just very stylish and really satisfying to pull off. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the game's mechanics. All of those things that all work together to form this really kind of intricate combat loop where all the mechanics work together to create this highly responsive, super satisfying twin-stick shooter combat. And of course the other half of all of this combat will be the enemies that you're fighting themselves. And there are lots and lots of fodder enemies, basic melee enemies that will all rush you as soon as they spawn, and very huge crowds, so you've got to deal with those. But as you go through the layers, you'll find more advanced enemies that take more punishment, or enemies that can launch volleys of projectiles in different configurations at you. And of course the big, nasty sort of mini-boss or boss-style enemies that'll show up that you'll need to defeat, that often have their own specific dangers and methods that you need to use to take care of them, especially the kinds that can fire huge screenfuls of projectiles or do really fast charges across the arenas and stuff, because the arenas themselves are very small. They're also constantly reconfiguring themselves. The arena that you're fighting within is just sort of a platform in the void, and as you go through each wave of enemies, it'll start to add and subtract bits of it and change its shape, and maybe sometimes add some pillars or some other stuff that you can sort of line of sight enemies with, or just like different topography changes basically that you've got to consider. So it's mostly going to be like a flat plane that is changing its exact shape at real time, and it's never that large. Even in the waves where it gets larger, it still never gets particularly big, so you're always really limited in terms of your space to dodge and stuff. And a lot of the difficulty of figuring out how to beat a certain wave of enemies is figuring out how to configure yourself around this new shape of the arena to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed. Also, at the end of a run, you will get a small amount of currency, and the way that the unlocks work in this game is sort of twofold. You can unlock new things by completing challenges. So, it'll be like kill 250 enemies with this thing, or destroy 8 shielded enemies with a Wrath Burst with this weapon, things like that. Just challenges involving using that weapon very efficiently. And once you do that, you will unlock the next weapon in line, but you can also spend this currency that you get from completed runs, or well, whether you fail or succeed, you still get some currency. It's just the better you do, the more currency you get. And you can spend large sums of that on basically bypassing these challenges and unlocking the next piece of equipment in that slot instead. So this means you're always kind of working towards unlocking something. Even if you're having trouble with one of the weapon challenges, it's like really hard for you or something, you can still gather up this currency and just buy it instead. There are 5 different layers to go through, and each layer has a large number of different waves of enemies and reconfigurations that it'll go through. I don't think you're intended to actually beat these the first time. I'm sure there are some people out there that are good enough to do that. I am definitely not. But I think you're intended to make small bits of progress as you start to memorize what enemies spawn when and what shapes the arena configures itself to and stuff like that, so that you can figure out how to be as efficient as possible and finally do it. I think you're intended to fight through each of these layers several times, getting farther and farther each time until you sort of figure it all out. There are also 4 different difficulties, and the difficulties do add more than just enemy health. They really up the challenge significantly, and they also give you more rewards. Personally, the medium difficulty is enough for me. I find this game to be extremely hard, so the Acolyte difficulty medium is probably about my limit. I will try the harder difficulties to see what they're like, but honestly, with as difficult as I find the game already, I probably won't be able to succeed at them very well. There is also an endgame challenge that involves putting all 5 of the layers in one big gauntlet where you have to run through all of them in one run, which sounds next to impossible for me, but it is definitely one of those things that you could work your way up to. Overall, I find Kill Knight to be a really addicting experience. It is sort of bite-sized because the runs only take a few minutes, but a lot happens in those few minutes, and by the end of it you'll feel like sweaty and like your heart's gonna fall out because everything happens so fast and is so adrenaline-fueled the whole time. It is a very difficult game with these really intricate mechanics that all sort of lock together and create a super satisfying combat system. The kind of combat where you have a really specific arsenal of weapons and skills, and you've got to figure out what situations each one is best in and know that you can pull it out for that exact situation when that situation happens. It's sort of it's more of a puzzle game really than it is like a traditional twin stick shooter, and the puzzle is in figuring out how all of your different weapons and stuff lock together to defeat whatever situation is in front of you. It's also got a fantastic presentation with a really nice soundtrack and some really interesting sound design that is very harsh and electronic and strange, which, I mean, the whole game has this sort of hellish theme deliberately so. And visually, it is very clean, so you never lose yourself in combat. Even when things get really, really hectic and fast, I've never lost my character or not known where I was on the screen. Even with screenfuls of enemies and projectiles, you still stand out, and it's very clear where you are. It also uses this really clean sort of selective desaturation effect where a lot of the colors are grays and then there's these bright reds that show up and sort of take precedence. And red is really the main accent color of the game. Almost everything has a sort of red accent on it, and it looks really good as a result, and it contributes to that very clean aesthetic that it has, but it also has a lot of sort of digital glitching effects and stuff that add to its presentation, without sacrificing from its clarity. So I highly recommend Kill Knight if you're a fan of extremely difficult shooters or just arena shooters in general or twin sticks. It's got a lot of fun content to go through, and it'll last you a while because of how addicting the gameplay loop is and how nicely all the mechanics fit together. So I'll link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Kill Knight so that you can check it out. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.